You are sitting by a fire 13,000 years ago. There is no music, no phone, no way to check the time. Just you, a few people you trust, and a stone bowl filled with something you made yourself out of crushed grain and water. You drink it. Your head feels lighter. The fire looks warmer than it did a minute ago. You laugh at something that was not even that funny. You have no idea what you just invented. You have no idea that thousands of years later, people will still be chasing that exact same feeling in 100 different forms all over the planet. So when did ancient humans actually start taking drugs? The honest answer is way earlier than most people think, and the story behind it is stranger than anything you learned in school. Most people assume drugs are a modern problem, something that shows up in movies about the 70s or in news stories about pills and needles. But that idea is completely wrong. Humans have been changing how their brains feel on purpose for so long that we cannot even find the actual starting point. Every time archaeologists think they found the oldest proof, someone digs somewhere else and pushes the date back even further. This is not a story about one invention. It is a story about thousands of separate groups of people on different continents who never met each other, all discovering the exact same idea at different times. Burn this, drink this, chew this, and something in your head changes. Let's start with the oldest confirmed one, because it is going to surprise you. In a cave called Raqefet, near modern-day Haifa in Israel, scientists found 3 stone bowls carved directly into the rock floor. Inside those bowls were tiny leftover bits of starch and plant material. When researchers studied them closely, they found the exact chemical fingerprint of malted grain that had been soaked, dried, mashed, heated, and left to ferment. In plain words, they found beer. Not beer from some famous old civilization with pyramids and kings. This beer was made by a group of hunter-gatherers called the Natufians, and it is roughly 13,000 years old. That is thousands of years before farming even existed, before anyone planted a single seed on purpose. These people had not even invented full-time villages yet, and they had already figured out how to turn wild grain into something that made them feel different. Some scientists now think the desire to keep brewing that drink might be one of the actual reasons humans started farming grain in the first place. Not hunger, not survival, the want for one more drink around the fire. That single discovery at Raqefet Cave kicked off a genuine argument among historians that is still going on today, sometimes jokingly called the beer before bread debate. For a long time, everyone assumed farming started because people needed more bread to survive. Grow wheat, grind it, bake it, eat it. Simple as that. But once scientists found proof that people were brewing beer thousands of years before large-scale farming existed, some researchers started wondering if the real motivation was social instead of purely about survival. Maybe early humans were not just trying to fill their stomachs. Maybe they were trying to throw a really good party over and over again, and eventually realized that planting their own grain on purpose was the only way to keep the good times coming. Now here is where the story gets a little spooky, because the Natufian beer was not the first time a human brain got changed by a plant. It was just the first time we can prove it with hard chemistry. Long before that, in a cave in modern-day Iraq called Shanidar, archaeologists dug up a Neanderthal burial site around 60,000 years old. Around the body, they found pollen from several flowering plants, and some of those plants are known today for having medicinal properties. For years, people said this proved Neanderthals understood plant medicine and were laying flowers on their dead out of love. It became one of the most famous discoveries in the history of archaeology. Later, other scientists pushed back and said the pollen might have blown in naturally or been dragged in by burrowing animals, and the debate is still not fully settled today. But even the possibility is wild to think about. It means our closest ancient relatives, a completely different species of human, might have already been experimenting with what plants do to the body tens of thousands of years before anyone we would call modern humans existed. Let's jump across the world now to Cyprus, an island in the eastern Mediterranean. Around 3,600 years ago, people there were making small clay jugs shaped exactly like an upside-down poppy seed pod. That shape is not a coincidence. Poppy pods are where opium comes from. When researchers at the British Museum tested the inside of these jugs, they found actual opium alkaloids, the same chemical family found in real opium. Now, it is possible this was just fancy perfume oil, since poppy oil was used for that too, and scientists are careful not to jump to conclusions. But the shape of the jug alone is a pretty big clue. Someone, 3,600 years ago, was proud enough of what was inside that bottle to shape the entire container like the plant it came from. That is basically ancient branding. Let's go even further back with a plant you have probably never thought about, called betel. In parts of Southeast Asia, people have been chewing betel leaves and nuts since at least 2600 years before today, and possibly earlier. Betel gives you a mild buzz, a warm feeling, a little extra energy, kind of like a very strong cup of coffee. Archaeologists have found the proof written directly onto human teeth. Ancient skeletons from Vietnam have teeth stained a deep reddish color from constant betel chewing, almost like a tattoo left behind by thousands of chewing sessions over a lifetime. And here is the part that will actually blow your mind. Betel chewing never stopped. It is still happening right now today, all across South Asia and Southeast Asia. Hundreds of millions of people chew betel every single day. This is not some dead ancient mystery. It is one of the oldest continuously used drugs on the entire planet, and most people outside that region have never even heard of it. Now let's talk about smoke, because smoke turns out to be one of humanity's favorite ways to send a plant straight into the bloodstream. In western China, at a burial ground called Jirzhankal, archaeologists found 10 wooden braziers, which are basically small fire pits, sitting inside 8 different tombs. Each one still had burnt stones inside, and when scientists tested the residue on those stones, they found extremely high levels of THC, the chemical in cannabis that gets you high. This site is around 2,500 years old, and it is currently the earliest confirmed proof anywhere on Earth of people intentionally burning cannabis specifically to breathe in the psychoactive smoke, not just growing it for rope or seeds. This was not some random accident either. It happened inside tombs during funerals, which means the smoke was almost certainly part of a ritual meant to connect the living with whoever had just died. Let's cross the entire planet again, this time to the Andes Mountains in Peru, to an ancient ceremonial site called Chavin de Huantar. Long before the Inca Empire ever existed, a culture called the Chavin built a massive complex of stone chambers and tunnels. Inside some of the smallest, most private rooms, the ones only a handful of people could ever enter, archaeologists found more than 20 bone tubes, clearly used for inhaling something straight up the nose. When scientists finally tested the residue, they confirmed traces of psychoactive substances. This dates back over 2,000 years. But here is the twist that makes this discovery genuinely fascinating. This was not something everyone in the community got to experience. The tiny, hidden chambers suggest that only a small, powerful group of people were allowed inside to take these substances. In other words, altering your mind here was treated as a privilege, something tied directly to power and status. If you were important enough, you got access to the visions. If you were not, you stayed outside the room. Now for one of the most incredible pieces of direct proof ever found, and it comes from a tiny Mediterranean island called Minorca, inside a cave named Es Caradix. In 1995, explorers found a hidden chamber holding more than 200 burials going back roughly 3,000 years. Near some of the bodies, archaeologists discovered small sealed tubes made of wood and deer antler, and inside those tubes were strands of human hair, carefully cut, dyed, and preserved. When modern scientists finally tested that ancient hair using advanced chemistry, they found something remarkable. The hair contained ephedrine, a stimulant, along with 2 other compounds called atropine and scopolamine, both of which are known to cause confusion, strange sensations, and vivid hallucinations. Hair grows slowly and steadily, almost like a recording tape, which meant scientists could tell these people had been taking these substances regularly for close to a whole year before they died. This is considered one of the strongest, most direct pieces of proof ever found for ancient drug use in Europe, because this time it is actual human hair that absorbed the chemicals from inside a real living body, rather than just a container that might have once held them. Before we leave South America, there is one more piece of this puzzle that is honestly kind of insane. In Chile, researchers studying ancient Andean mummies found actual traces of cocaine metabolites still inside the bodies. That means the coca leaf, the plant cocaine eventually comes from, was already being chewed by people in that region long before Europeans ever set foot in the Americas. Coca leaves on their own are nowhere near as strong as processed cocaine. Chewing the raw leaf mostly gives a mild energy boost, helps with hunger, and helps people cope with thin mountain air at high altitude. For countless generations, it was treated less like a party drug and more like a tool for surviving brutal, high-altitude environments, similar to how someone today might drink coffee before a long hike. Mushrooms deserve a mention here too. Across multiple continents, researchers studying old rock art and ritual sites have proposed that certain mushrooms containing psilocybin, the compound behind what people now call magic mushrooms, were used in ceremonies going back thousands of years. In Siberia, there is strong historical evidence that some communities used a different mushroom called Amanita muscaria. the classic red mushroom with white spots, as part of shamanic rituals meant to trigger visions and communication with spirits. Mushroom evidence is genuinely tricky for archaeologists to pin down, since fungi barely survive in the ground compared to something durable like stone or bone. But the pattern keeps showing up across cultures that never had contact with each other, which is exactly the kind of coincidence that makes scientists sit up and take notice. Let's head to North America now, near the Rio Grande in what is now Texas. Archaeologists working at sites there found preserved peyote buttons, which come from a small spineless cactus containing a powerful psychoactive compound called mescaline. These buttons were found at sites connected to Native American communities, and some estimates place peyote use in this region back roughly 10,000 years. Peyote was never treated as some casual thing to mess around with. For countless generations, it has been used in deeply spiritual ceremonies, tied to vision, healing, and connection to something bigger than any one person. It remains a sacred plant in certain Native American religious practices to this very day, protected by law specifically because of its deep cultural and spiritual importance. So why does this keep happening, over and over, on completely different continents, among people who had zero contact with each other and zero way of sharing the idea? A psychologist named Ronald Siegel spent years studying this exact question, and he proposed something genuinely wild. He argued that the drive to change your state of mind might be a basic biological urge in animals generally, almost like hunger or thirst, not just some weird human habit. And animals really do back this up in strange ways. In Tasmania, wallabies have been caught wandering into legal opium poppy fields and eating the plants, then hopping around in giant confused circles like they completely forgot how to walk straight. Farmers have actually reported crop circles in their poppy fields caused by nothing except stoned wallabies going in loops. Elephants have been observed seeking out overripe, fermented fruit that has basically turned into natural alcohol. If even wild animals with no culture, no rituals, and no belief systems are drawn toward altering their own minds, it makes the human habit look a lot less like a modern mistake, and a lot more like something written deep into biology itself. It also means the moment you picture in your head some caveman by a fire deciding to try something new for the very first time was probably not even a human moment originally. It might trace back to something far older than our entire species, buried somewhere in the instincts we share with the rest of the animal kingdom. Here is the part almost nobody talks about though. For nearly all of this long history, taking something mind-altering was almost never a casual, everyday thing. It was medicine, it was ritual, it was reserved for funerals, for healers, for leaders, for connecting with something people believed was beyond the physical world. The Natufians brewed beer for community feasts honoring their dead. The people at Chavin treated visions as something earned through status, not something anyone could just walk in and grab. The smoke at Jirzankal rose specifically over graves. These substances were treated with heavy respect, almost like tools, carefully controlled and deeply tied to meaning. The idea of using something purely for a quick, casual, everyday buzz, with basically no ritual attached at all, is actually one of the newest parts of this entire story, not the oldest. So when did ancient humans really start taking drugs? Based on everything we have physically dug up and tested so far, the earliest confirmed proof takes us back roughly 13,000 years to a group of hunter-gatherers brewing beer inside a cave in Israel, thousands of years before anyone had planted a single crop on purpose. But the truth almost certainly reaches back even further than that, into a past so old that the plants, the pipes, and the bowls simply rotted away long before anyone with a shovel and a notebook ever showed up to find them. Every single year, archaeologists dig up something older, and every single year, this timeline gets pushed back even more. The desire to feel different, just for one night, around a fire, with people you trust, might honestly be one of the oldest, most human things there has ever been.